One thing I did notice with these devices, the Lab Arc, is there is a discordant frequency in this, which can be a little bit nerve-wracking. And I've noticed this before, like with orgonite, and it often tends to be that EMF will get caught up in the crystals and into the entire apparatus. So I'm not sure if there's a good way of getting it out, but that's another good reason to run it for a short time for experimentation and then just simply to shut the device off. I've also noticed that there is an odd effect with sound. This first happened when I had this thing set up and I accidentally dropped a garbage can next to it, and the garbage can made a boom sound, and it was really an odd feeling because it felt like the whole boom had pulsated right through me. And so I tried clapping and snapping my fingers right next to that point there, and there is something happening with the sound. I tested light. I couldn't get light to have the same effect, but I did find sound. So a person experimented with either clapping your hands or banging a drum or even singing into this area. See if you get any sensations out of it. Now, let me tell you what happened to me during the development of the Lab Arc. Now, I have mentioned how the Dawkins effect squeezes things down and chokes out spiritual manifestations, the no, curse you, whereas the yes, bless you tends to open it up, along with the breath, like as in the name of Yahshua and Yahashua and Yahweh. And so too, devices like the water bowls, the spirit bowls, will tend to spin and open things up. I also noticed that it works with the magnets when you fire magnets like into crystals. When you fire the north-seeking side of the magnet into a crystal, it increases the energy of the crystal. Now, I was doing research into this, and I had made myself a test device, which is just a small container with a neodymium magnet in the bottom, and it was firing the north-seeking side of the magnet upward, and I put crystals above that. And as I was working or had this device near me, I noticed something happening to my body. I've always had problems with my mineral balances. Calcium balancing with magnesium, sodium balancing with potassium, copper balancing with zinc. And I've always had a problem with the charge of my body. See, the organic objects, as creatures like humans, need to have an anion charge, a negative ion charge. A positive ion charge tends to be a cause for sickness and disease. And so my body always tended to have a cation charge, whereas I needed more of an anion charge. And so I'm working with the crystals, and I start to notice that my minerals were balanced for the first time in my life. And particularly, I had a lot of problems with copper and zinc. You know, if I had too much chocolate or too much coffee, the copper level would go way high compared to the zinc, and I would get obsessive thoughts. A song or a phrase would just go in my brain and just go over and over and over. You just couldn't get it out because the copper level was too high compared to the zinc. And I was developing an anion charge. And I thought, well, what is going on here? I was wondering where in the world the anions were coming from and the other minerals. Where were they coming from? Because I had made and researched and did a video on a thing I call the medical cone, where you could take a cement cone, put somebody's DNA on it, and then below it you could put minerals that they might be low in, and this thing will track them and actually induce those minerals into them. So I was curious if there might be some sort of tracking field that was on me. So I took my pendulum one day and I just started going around myself looking for a tracking field that might be following me around. And I started on my right, in the back as much as I could, in the front and the left side. You know, I was testing up to here and couldn't find anything. And then I thought around my head, so I'm testing, ion testing here. I got around to my mouth and there was a tracking field here. And I very carefully followed it, and it went 18 inches out in front of me and stopped. And I noticed that there was anions in this tracking field. And I noticed that there was also zinc in this tracking field, which was really fascinating, because when I say it stopped, I guess the right way is to say it began. But I didn't pick up an orb, I didn't pick up a portal, I didn't pick up anything. There was just seemed to be nothing there, and then suddenly the anions were there, and the zinc was there, and it was going into my mouth. And I noticed that I had to have my mouth open and throat open for this thing to go in and have its effect. And I also noticed that if I had too much chocolate or coffee, the zinc level in this tracking field would become stronger. So this was a dynamic field. It wasn't something steady like the medical cone that I had, which would constantly dose a person. This was dynamic. So if my calcium got off with the magnesium, it would replenish. It would give me what I needed to balance the thing out. Now, granted, if I was going a little crazy on the food, eating too much chocolate, too much coffee, and too much stress, the levels would get off. But if I was behaving myself and eating everything right, the levels would stay where they were supposed to be. Now, just as the Dawkins effect squeezes and chokes out spiritual manifestations, I believe it was through the work of the crystals that it opened it up. And now I'm having this weird manifestation of this tracking field coming out of nowhere and depositing into me anions and minerals and monitoring my levels and keeping me balanced. And my curious mind is like, well, this is so fascinating, because I don't detect anything here, except I was getting at this 18-inch mark where the tracking field disappeared. I was getting a marker field going up and down, which I assumed that that's where the thing began in this dimension. It appeared to me to be a trans-dimensional, like a portal or something breaking through. But I was really curious, since I can't detect anything out here, like an orb or anything. I thought, what is this thing? Does it have a momentum or a size, or, I'm trying to figure out how to test this thing. And I thought, well, if I whip my head really fast, if I move my head over here, will this thing slowly go over here? If I move it over here, will it slowly go over here? And to my surprise, as I whipped my head to the left, it went, and to the right, went, and left, it went. And what I realized, this thing had no spatial anchor of its own. It was the dynamics and the physics of the tracking field, which runs horizontal, that it was keeping it at this horizontal level to my mouth. And I thought, well, what about the distance? And I observed that it was the marker field, because the marker field contained the anion charge, which was depositing into me an anion charge. And as my body had this anion charge and was radiating it out, and the marker field had the anion charge, like charges repel. So my body was actually pushing the field 18 inches away from me because of the anion charge. And I noticed this when I laid down. My body was horizontal, the marker fields were vertical. This field would move within 6 inches of my mouth. If I stood up so we were both vertical, it would move back to 18 inches. And to make a quick test of this, I took the old style AA batteries that spray ions out, and I took the negative end and I fired it into the side of the marker field. And to my amazement, I thought the marker field would bend, but it didn't. The entire field moved over. The battery, the anion spray from the battery, was able to push the whole thing over to its side. Now add to this that if I put my hand on the marker fields, I could feel my hands burning. Now to me, that's a good sign. And so one day I'm laying down, I'm on my side, this field is right here, and I thought, well, every time I close my mouth, this thing cannot deposit or balance me out. So I laid some crystals by my nose, thinking that, that'll give it more lubricity, can actually go into my nostrils instead of, having to wait till my mouth is open. And then it's like, this is really stupid. I feel that presence. This thing is supplying everything that I need for balancing. I'm going to take a risk. And I opened my mouth, and at first I said, I give you permission to come into me. And I opened my mouth, and that field, instead of being 6 inches out, went into me and is now doing its thing from the inside. And I prayed, and I said, God, I thank you that you have sent this field to put these minerals and anions in. But what I really need more than anything else is a field or a device or something to take the toxins out. Because I was in a condition called toxic overload. And the reason was 3 years earlier, I had purchased a brand new truck. Now, if you know anything about that new car smell, it is highly toxic. And for most people, it's not so bad if you're just driving your car around town or going to work. But for me, I live in my truck. I get out of my truck on the weekends, maybe I'm out, 1 day a weekend or 2 days a weekend. For the rest of the time, I live in the truck. I'm inhaling that toxic stuff that's off-gassing. And unbeknownst to me, my trailer had become contaminated with cesium. Because when we deliver into Canada and come back into the United States, oftentimes we're sent into secondary screening where they will x-ray our trailers. We drive slowly through this x-ray device, and they claim it's just gamma rays, but somehow this x-ray device that they use at the border was infusing cesium into my trailer. Now, my trailer has an aluminum floor, and it's a reefer trailer, and because of the humidity and condensation that we have inside the trailer, the aluminum will oxidize. And so you'll get this aluminum oxide in there that's infused with cesium, and I would, after every load, faithfully go in with a leaf blower and blow out the any dust or anything that's inside the trailer. But I never used a dust mask because I was unaware of what was happening. Well, the dust and the aluminum oxide were infused with this radioactive cesium, and it was building up inside of me and breaking my health down. I was experiencing acid reflux really bad. I had a problem with endurance. I was getting weak. I was having a shortness of breath. And understand, I was doing everything right. I mean, I was eating organic. I was not eating out at restaurants. I was not drinking pop. I was drinking purified water. I was doing 2 coffee enemas a day on the weekends. I would do ion foot cleanses. But I could not cleanse out fast enough, the toxins that I was absorbing through the truck and the trailer. And to deal with a toxic buildup, my body was encapsulating, especially the cesium, it was encapsulating it in calcium. And the other toxins, my body was producing fat to encapsulate it. So I was putting on weight. I had gotten up to 216 pounds, which was more than I'd ever weighed before. But one of the problems that I faced was about 27 years ago, I had a severe case of Hodgkin's lymphoma, a huge tumor in the middle of my chest. And it was cancer, and that's what changed me into being nutritional after going through a bout with that. But they did a month of chemotherapy, and that beat this huge tumor down to like a softball size. And then they did a month of daily radiation where they fired through a lead shield. They fired uranium into my chest, and the uranium went into my skin and into my spine, along with a lot of the erosion of the lead went also in there. The uranium carried it in. So I've got lead in my spine and in my chest, but there was also a problem of overspray. Uranium burned and damaged arteries and muscles in the heart and the aortic valve. was damaged by it. Now, one of the problems, even though it was 27 years ago, it was still damaged tissue, burned tissue, and the cesium tends to gravitate toward damaged tissue. So the cesium from my trailer that I was exposed to, a lot of it was going into the heart, into the aortic valve, into the arteries, and cesium burns so bad that the body will send in calcium to neutralize it, to buffer it. So very rapidly, my heart was being calcified. Cesium was going in, calcium was going in to buffer it. And so I was getting weak and getting sick, and my heart was calcifying. So this is why I prayed that God would show me something, or a device or an energy field or something to get the toxins out, because I knew my condition was getting bad really fast. So anyhow, I'm working with the lab arc, and I'm putting these things together and testing them out, and I see this energy is really churning through it, especially the lab arc. But the question is, what is the practical purpose of this energy? What does it do? And I couldn't figure it out. There was no test that I was coming up with to really get a positive, trying to figure this out. So I thought, well, I've taken risk before, so I'm going to take another risk here. And one weekend when I was home, I took the lab arc and I put it beside me where I was going to sleep, and I was going to spend time with it and see what happened to my body. After all, I am the lab rat. So I put it on a little table right next to me in bed, and before I went to bed, I just kind of prayed. I just said, please show me what this thing does. And I went to sleep, woke up the next morning, and I was not feeling good at all. I thought, this isn't good, whatever it is. I don't know what's happening, but I don't like it. So I took the lab arc and I didn't shut it down, but I moved it out to the living room. Next night I went to bed, got up in the morning, and I began to vomit. Let me take a quick little detour here to explain something about the ways that God will work. There was a guy in the scriptures. His name is Joseph, the guy with the coat of many colors. He kept getting visions and revelations from God that he would rule over his brothers, who were all older than him, and they would bow down to him. Well, unfortunately, he told his brothers, and they reacted by selling him to a traveling merchant. And then this merchant sold him to a guy named Potiphar. Potiphar's wife accused him of trying to rape her. And he ended up in a dungeon. So here this guy with these lofty dreams of being exalted went down, down, down. And eventually later on he was exalted. But so often with the ways of God, you get something lofty and you go way down. And I was going down because unbeknownst to me, a field had moved into my body and was now dislodging all the toxins of 50 years of life, and the new car smell that was building up, and the cesium that was building up. But I had no concept of what was going on. I was starting to vomit. Everything that I ate, everything that I drank was coming right back up. I thought this must be the flu or something. And like an idiot, since I didn't know what it was, after 2 days of being at home, I went back out on the road. And I kick myself to this day for that, because I went out driving thinking it'll just clear. It must be the one-day flu or something. No, it got worse and worse and worse. And it was all I could do to get back home. My health was going down so bad. And when I finally did get back home, I think it was like 7-8 days later, I could barely walk. My wife had to help me walk, had to help me change my clothes, and we were trying to figure out what was going on, and we realized that the body was dislodging all these toxins. And I basically had a toxic sludge going through my blood and my brain, and I couldn't think and I couldn't function. So we started taking diatomaceous earth to absorb the cesium, to absorb the uranium. We started taking activated charcoal to get a lot of these other toxins out. We started taking psyllium fiber. I started doing Epsom salt baths, high colonic enemas, more coffee enemas, more ion foot cleanses. And this crud was on the move. And the worst part was, it appeared that the cesium was not wanting to come out. As a matter of fact, it was relocating itself from where it was going into the heart area, and my heart was shutting down rapidly. So after being at home for probably about 3 or 4 days after getting off the road, I went into the emergency room at the hospital, and next thing I know, I'm in an ambulance going to a heart hospital. And I was there for 14 days. And the first week they were supervising me, but they had no idea about the toxins and the load that was going through my body and the pain I was in the brain and everything. I was actually starting to hallucinate because of the lead and the mercury and the uranium and the cesium and the cadmium and the barium and all the nasty stuff that was in my blood. And they wouldn't allow me to do my cleanses because they had me hooked up to all this wiring stuff. So I wasn't getting cleansed out, and it was torment for me. But what they did finally is they went and cut my chest open, did open heart surgery. They scraped the calcium out of my arteries in the heart. They replaced the aortic valve with a synthetic alloy valve. They put in what they call a maze to try to get the heart rhythm to go back. And after 2 weeks of being there, I was finally released, and I was very, very weak. So we continued with the cleansings, but it was really slow considering the load that I was under. And one day when everybody was gone, I got out my foot cleanse devices, and you're only supposed to do half hour every other day. Well, I was desperate, because I was basically a zombie, couldn't get out of bed. And I did 3 hours. I don't recommend this ever to anybody else, but I would do it until it got dark, and I'd ion test it and see what was in it, and I'd dump it out and redo it again and test it again until it got really dark and ugly, and redo it again. And finally, after 3 hours, basically the majority of the toxic load was taken out, and I was able to get out of bed. But the cesium did not and does not want to come out. We have to keep fighting that thing and taking things that would flush it out. I had edema really bad in my legs, and we found out the cesium was in the legs, and the calcium was moving down in there and was plugging everything up, trying to neutralize it. So I had to rub my legs down with apple cider vinegar to neutralize, to break up the calcium, and then elevate my feet to get the cesium to flow out of my leg area so that my body could process it out. It has been a bugger. And then add to this little surprise we got when I got home. The doctors told me that I was now going to have to go to what's called a Coumadin clinic. Now, Coumadin or warfarin is basically rat poison, but they want you to take this because they say that your body will attack the alloy valve, will build clots on it, and the clots will flake off and go either into your heart or into your brain. In the heart, it'll cause a heart attack. In the brain, it will cause a stroke. So in order to prevent this, they need to monitor your what's called the INR level, the thinness of your blood, which is normally 1.1, but they want it up to 2 or 3, and they're going to give you doses of this warfarin in order to get the blood thinner so it doesn't attack the valve. Well, they started me on 4 milligrams a day, and my INR, when we tested it, was 1.1. They upped it to 6 milligrams a day, 1.1, 8 milligrams a day, 1.1, 10 milligrams a day, 1.1, 12 milligrams a day, 1.1, 15 milligrams a day, 1.1, 20 milligrams a day, 1.1, and after 6 months, they messing with this stuff, they finally told me that they want me going up to 25 milligrams a day, and I told them no. I said, I am done. My hair is falling out. I'm feeling sick from this stuff. This blood thinner has not thinned my blood. I'm still at 1.1. My blood would not thin. I mean, even if I changed my diet, and I tried this, going on a blood thinning diet, eating everything that would thin your blood out, 1.1. And I told my doctor, I said, it's been 6 months. If I haven't had a stroke or a heart attack by now, I probably won't. I'm done with this. I'm not taking any more. And it has been now 6 more months since I took the last of it. I haven't had a stroke or a heart attack yet. But for some reason, that same field that moved into me that dislodged the toxins is also keeping the INR, the blood thinness, at 1.1. And knock on wood, has prevented this thing from creating a heart attack or a stroke. So it was when I was messing with the crystals and the magnets that I had this field that started injecting me with anions and was balancing out my minerals. And then I prayed that God would show me a field that would take the toxins out. And then I started messing around with the lab arc, and suddenly a field moved into me that started dislodging this. But unfortunately, it dislodged them way too fast and almost killed me. But at least the stuff is coming out. But you can see when I did the video of the lab arc, you notice all of the warnings, all of the disclaimers, because I don't know if if this, what happened to me, is a fluke, whether it's anomalous just to me. It might not, nobody else might experience anything off the lab arc, but I did. And I am so concerned that somebody is going to whip one of these things together and have something traumatic happen to them. So I just, buyer beware. I mean, maker be warned. Be careful with this thing, because I don't want anything like this to happen to you. It has been about a year since this thing happened. I still have problems with digestion. I have to eat very high-calorie foods because I went down from 216 to 153 in a matter of months. And the high-calorie foods now, I can keep the weight on, but I really have to work at it. The heart rhythm runs at about 140 beats per minute, which is about twice as fast as it should. And it will get up to about 152 if I've exercised. And the alloy valve is loud. And you may have heard it in my other videos. That is actually the heart valve pounding away. And I put the microphone under my shirt. I'm going to breathe in here and see if we can record this thing. Let me breathe in here. I don't know if you can hear that or not. And that thing pounds. I mean, it's like, you can hear it vibrating through your whole body. I mean, it's slamming, but at least I know it's working. And at least I'm alive. I haven't had a stroke, haven't had a heart attack. And thank God the toxins are coming out. And by the way, I did sell my truck and trailer in order to pay for the $50,000 hospital bill that I had. But I got out of that and got into an older truck, and I'm not hauling a reefer anymore. So I don't have to worry about that toxicity exposure.